Germany emerged from the First World War in a state of profound exhaustion, disillusionment, and instability. The war had drained its resources, shattered its political structure, and left its population bitterly divided. The peace that followed was far from satisfactory. Burdened by the Treaty of Versailles, crushed under the weight of reparations, and struggling with unprecedented inflation, Germany became a shadow of its former imperial self. Despite still possessing industrial potential in the form of factories and companies that survived the war, the nation was economically crippled and politically fragmented. Yet, in a surprising and alarming transformation that unfolded between 1933 and 1941, Germany rose from these ruins to build one of the most formidable war machines the world had ever seen. The new German army, rebuilt in defiance of international agreements, operated with speed, precision, and an efficiency that stunned Europe. By the end of 1941, most of the continent had fallen under German control, and German forces stood at the very gates of Moscow, convinced that total victory was within reach. How such a dramatic reversal occurred can only be understood by examining the collapse of the old system, the failures of the Weimar Republic, and the rise of a new regime determined to reverse Germany's misfortunes by any means necessary. The downfall of the old monarchy marked the beginning of this turbulent journey. After the end of the First World War, Kaiser Wilhelm II faced mounting criticism from both the German people and his own military leadership. With mutinies spreading and unrest growing, he was forced to abdicate on November 9, 1918. The following day, a provisional government was formed by representatives of the Social Democratic Party and the Independent Social Democrats, who tried to steer the nation toward stability. By the spring of 1919, the Weimar Republic was formally established, and Friedrich Ebert became its first president. However, the new republic was immediately confronted by challenges that threatened its survival. The Treaty of Versailles proved to be one of the harshest blows. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for starting the war, pay massive reparations, and relinquish valuable territory. Its military was reduced to just 100,000 men, a symbolic force compared to its pre-war strength. These restrictions not only humiliated the country, but also created deep resentment among both civilians and former military leaders. Economic conditions worsened rapidly. Hyperinflation ravaged the country in the early 1920s, wiping out savings, destroying the middle class, and deepening public distrust in the government. Later, the Great Depression brought unemployment and poverty to millions, creating fertile ground for extremism of all kinds. Into this atmosphere stepped Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party. For many disillusioned Germans, tired of chaos and fearful of the growing influence of communism, Hitler's promises of stability, national pride, and economic revival appeared to offer a way out. By 1932, the Nazi Party had become the largest political party in the German parliament. The following year, Hitler was appointed chancellor. His early months in power were decisive, demonstrating a clear plan for consolidating authority and reshaping Germany, according to the vision he had laid out years earlier in his speeches and writings. Hitler's first steps involved dismantling the democratic structures of the Weimar Republic from within. By invoking Article 48, he undermined civil liberties and targeted political opponents, especially the communists. The Reichstag fire in February 1933 provided him with an excuse to expand government powers even further. Shortly afterward, the Enabling Act was passed, granting Hitler the ability to enact laws without parliamentary approval. With this act, he effectively eliminated the limits on his authority and neutralized any remaining opposition. Control of the media and propaganda ensured that the public narrative aligned with the goals of the new regime. With internal power secured, Hitler turned his attention outward. Rebuilding the German military became a central objective, carried out in open violation of the Versailles restrictions. In 1935, the Wehrmacht was officially established as the unified armed forces of the Third Reich, encompassing land forces, naval forces, and a rapidly growing air force. Conscription was reinstated, and defense spending skyrocketed. Every officer in the military was required to swear an oath of loyalty directly to Hitler, solidifying his role as supreme commander. Although some generals initially viewed Hitler with skepticism, his early successes gradually won them over. The reoccupation of the Rhineland in 1936 marked a turning point. In defiance of the treaty, German troops marched into this demilitarized region. The Allies, committed to a policy of appeasement and unwilling to risk another war, did nothing. Hitler interpreted their inaction as weakness. Encouraged, he pursued further expansion. Austria was annexed in 1938 in the Anschluss, welcomed by many Austrians who supported unification. Later that year, Germany seized the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia with the approval of Britain and France, who hoped to secure peace by conceding to his demands. In 1939, Germany took over the rest of Czechoslovakia, violating earlier promises but facing no meaningful consequence. By now, public support for the regime inside Germany had reached unprecedented levels. Many citizens, impressed by restored employment, improved infrastructure, and national pride, embraced Hitler's leadership. Opposition was muted not only by propaganda, but by intimidation, the Gestapo, and the suppression of dissent. Military leaders who once doubted Hitler's ambitions began to trust his judgment due to his unbroken string of territorial victories. The country's economy, bolstered by new resources and increased industrial output, was now oriented entirely toward preparing for large-scale war. With Germany's military rebuilt and its position strengthened, Hitler set his sights on the next major objective, the invasion of Poland. The motive was partly to regain territories lost in the Treaty of Versailles and partly to expand eastward for resources and strategic advantage. But another key concern shaped Germany's military strategy. Hitler believed that Germany could not afford a prolonged war. The country lacked the raw materials and economic capacity necessary to sustain a drawn-out conflict against multiple major powers. Therefore, the German High Command adopted a new operational doctrine designed to secure rapid and decisive victories, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Although not entirely new in concept, Blitzkrieg refined earlier strategies emphasizing mobility, coordinated assaults, and concentrated force. The German approach involved swift, combined attacks by tanks, aircraft, and mechanized infantry, aiming to break enemy lines and create chaos before the opponent could mobilize. This method stood in stark contrast to the slow, attritional trench warfare of the First World War. To the Germans, speed meant survival. Their aim was to overwhelm their enemies before they had time to react, forcing quick surrenders and preventing the kind of long conflict that had devastated Germany 2 decades earlier. By the late 1930s, everything was in place: a rebuilt army, a mobilized population, an aggressive foreign policy, and a strategic doctrine geared toward rapid conquest. From a nation broken by defeat, humiliation, and economic collapse, Germany had transformed itself into the most powerful military force in Europe. The path from ruin to resurgence was shaped by a mixture of political upheaval, public desperation, calculated risk-taking, and the ruthless ambition of its new leader. What followed would plunge the world into an even greater catastrophe than the First War, demonstrating both the fragility of peace and the immense consequences of unchecked power. Germany entered the years after the First World War in a state of collapse, humiliated by defeat and crushed under the weight of an unsatisfactory peace that had shaken its political stability, economy, and society. The nation still possessed significant industrial potential, with factories, railways, and skilled workers who could have helped rebuild the country under different conditions. But the economic strain, combined with staggering inflation and widespread unemployment, left Germany a shadow of the powerful empire it had once been under the Kaiser. The monarchy was gone, and the democratic system that replaced it struggled to survive in an atmosphere marked by anger, resentment, and despair. Yet within less than 2 decades, Germany would re-emerge as the most dangerous military power in Europe, shaping events that would plunge the world into the deadliest conflict in human history. The collapse of the old order began in the final days of the First World War. As defeat became inevitable, Kaiser Wilhelm II faced increasing pressure from the public and from his own military leadership, who blamed him for the disastrous war and the deteriorating conditions at home. On November 9, 1918, the Kaiser abdicated and fled into exile. The following day, a provisional government was formed, dominated by the Social Democratic Party and the Independent Social Democratic Party. For a moment it appeared that Germany might stabilize, but the country soon faced a series of crises that pushed it closer to disaster. In early 1919, the Weimar Republic was officially established with Friedrich Ebert as its first president, but the new government entered office already burdened by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty reduced the German military to a mere 100,000 troops, stripped the country of territory, demanded enormous reparations, and assigned full blame for the war. It was a national humiliation, and millions of Germans felt betrayed by their leaders for signing it. Economic difficulties followed quickly. Hyperinflation destroyed savings, workers struggled to survive, and the arrival of the Great Depression in 1929 crushed any remaining economic recovery. These hardships caused many Germans to lose faith in their democratic government. A significant number of people feared that the Weimar Republic was too weak to resist communist revolution, which had spread across parts of Europe in the years after the war. It was during this period that Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party emerged as an increasingly influential force. Many Germans, desperate for stability and convinced that democracy was failing, turned to Hitler because he offered strong leadership and a promise to restore national pride. By 1932, his party had become the largest in the German parliament. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor. Within weeks he began reshaping Germany's political landscape, moving quickly and ruthlessly to eliminate opposition and secure absolute power. Hitler began consolidating control through propaganda, violence, and manipulative legal measures. After the burning of the Reichstag building, Article 48 was invoked, allowing the government to bypass civil rights protections and suppress political enemies, especially communists. Soon after, the Enabling Act was passed, granting Hitler the authority to enact laws without the approval of the president or parliament. In practice, this transformed Germany into a dictatorship. Hitler then focused on reshaping the military. The Treaty of Versailles was ignored as Germany rapidly rearmed, expanded its military forces, increased production of weapons, and introduced conscription. The Wehrmacht was created in 1935 as a unified military force consisting of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Defense spending soared, and Hitler demanded complete loyalty from every military commander. As Germany grew stronger, it also became more aggressive. The Rhineland, a region that had been demilitarized under the Treaty of Versailles, was reoccupied by German troops in 1936. This move carried enormous risk, but the Allies did not respond. Their policy of appeasement gave Hitler confidence. Soon after, Austria was annexed and became part of the Reich. The Sudetenland followed, and eventually the remainder of Czechoslovakia was taken. Each success increased Hitler's popularity and convinced even skeptical German military officers that his judgment was correct. By 1939, Germany had transformed itself into a nation capable of challenging the major powers of Europe. With the military rebuilt, Germany prepared to reclaim lost territory and expand further. Avoiding a long war was a key priority, since Germany lacked the resources to fight multiple enemies for an extended period. To achieve rapid victories, German military planners developed a new method of fighting known as Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war. The fundamental idea behind this tactic was speed, concentration of force, rapid communication, and the use of mechanized units to overwhelm the enemy before they had time to respond. The strategy was supported by technological advances in vehicles, tanks, aircraft, and radio communication systems, which allowed German forces to coordinate movements more effectively than during the First World War. Blitzkrieg relied on identifying weak points in enemy defenses and launching concentrated attacks at those locations. German tanks, supported by aircraft, would break through the front lines, pushing deep into enemy territory. Motorized infantry units followed closely behind, expanding the breach and securing the flanks so that reinforcements could flow through. German aircraft disrupted enemy communication, bombed supply routes, and prevented reinforcements from arriving. Once enemy forces were disorganized and forced to retreat, German units would encircle them, cutting them off from supplies and escape routes. These encircled troops often surrendered, allowing Germany to win battles with fewer casualties and far more quickly than traditional warfare methods would permit. The strategy worked with devastating effectiveness. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, the Blitzkrieg shocked the world with its speed and impact. Poland collapsed within weeks, triggering the beginning of the Second World War. Germany then executed rapid and nearly uncontested victories in Denmark and Norway, followed by a massive attack through Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The French military, still relying on slower defensive strategies from the previous war, was unprepared for the speed and flexibility of the German attack. The Ardennes Forest, once considered an impenetrable barrier, became the route through which German armored units burst into France, bypassing the heavily defended Maginot Line. France fell quickly, and by the summer of 1940, almost all of Western Europe was under German control. These victories raised German confidence to extraordinary levels. Their next target was the Soviet Union, which Hitler viewed as both an ideological enemy and a vast territory rich in resources. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. At first, the Blitzkrieg strategy once again produced spectacular results. German forces advanced nearly 200 miles in the first week, destroying thousands of Soviet aircraft on the ground and capturing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Soviet defenses collapsed under the initial assault, and German troops advanced toward Moscow. However, the Soviet Union differed from Germany's earlier targets in several decisive ways. The country's immense size, its harsh climate, and its ability to relocate factories deep into the interior allowed the Soviets to absorb losses that would have crushed smaller nations. Furthermore, Stalin's initial disbelief that Germany would actually attack delayed the Soviet response. But once the reality of the invasion became undeniable, Soviet resistance intensified. The Blitzkrieg, designed for short, intense campaigns, began to lose effectiveness during the long months of fighting. Germany's supply lines grew overstretched, the weather deteriorated, and the momentum that had carried the Wehrmacht forward began to fade. By the late autumn of 1941, the situation had changed dramatically. German troops, exhausted and unprepared for the brutal winter, struggled to continue advancing. The initial advantage gained through rapid movement was gone. The Soviet counteroffensive swept across the frozen front, pushing the Germans back from the outskirts of Moscow. It became clear that the Blitzkrieg strategy, though effective against medium-sized countries with weaker defenses, was not sufficient for a prolonged war against a vast and resilient opponent. From that point forward, the war began to turn against Germany. Their failures in the Soviet Union were not due solely to harsh weather, as was sometimes claimed later, but to a combination of factors. Miscalculations by leaders, the enormous scale of the Soviet territory, underestimated Soviet production capacity, and the loss of surprise and momentum that Blitzkrieg required for success. As the conflict dragged on, Germany found itself facing a coalition of powerful enemies, the Soviets in the east, and increasingly the British and Americans in the west, while lacking the resources to sustain battles on multiple fronts. The effectiveness of the German military in the early years of the war resulted from a combination of ideological determination, technological innovation, strategic boldness, and opportunistic timing. The rearmament program, which exploited the weaknesses of the Treaty of Versailles, produced a modern and well-organized fighting force. Experienced officers executed their plans with a high level of discipline and coordination. Meanwhile, the initial hesitance and misjudgments of Germany's opponents contributed to its rapid expansion. But these strengths could not shield Germany from the consequences of overreaching ambition. The same factors that allowed the nation to rise so quickly ultimately contributed to its collapse, as the war expanded far beyond what Blitzkrieg or German production capabilities could sustain.